Hello, this is Professor James Strickler, and this is a course in American government. This lesson is from Unit 4 about the legislative branch, and it's Lesson 11 about congressional elections. In this lesson, you'll learn about members of Congress being professional politicians, about them engaging in perpetual campaigns, about them being in safe seats, about the minimum cost for them to win elections, and about the demographic characteristics of those who win elections. Let's begin with this question of how members of Congress treat their elections. Most members of Congress are professional politicians. Now, what I mean by that is that this is their career. This is how they make money for their family, how they put food on the table, how they advance in life. Here I have photos of the two youngest members of Congress, a 30-year-old representative and a 37-year-old senator. These people in these pictures, this is their career. This is where they're going to be, they hope, for the next 30 years of their lives, serving in the United States Congress. And it is not atypical at all for people who serve in Congress to be there for a very long time. The average length of service for members of Congress is 9 years in the House of Representatives and 10 years in the Senate currently. Now, that's average, so you have new people, like the ones that I show here that were just recently elected, and you have people that have been there for a long time. The ones that are new want to end up being among those who have been there for a long time. But also consider this. When we think about them being professional politicians, we can't just think about the amount of time that they actually spend in Congress as their career making money for their family. But we also have to consider that most of them were elected to some other office before coming to Congress. They were state legislators, or they were governors, or they were city council members, or something like that. Most of these people who serve in Congress have been continually serving in one political position or another throughout their adult lives. In fact, a survey done of members of Congress asking them what their career was, the most common response was that they were public servants, which is a nice way for them to admit that they are career politicians. Even those who chose another profession, such as saying that they were lawyers, were in a way avoiding the truth of being career politicians, because while they may have trained to be lawyers and were lawyers for a short time, they've actually, for the most part, spent most of their adult lives, most of their working lives, actually as politicians. An example of this can be seen in the current president and vice president of the United States. President Obama, if you asked him back when he was a United States senator before getting elected president, what his profession was, he would have said lawyer. But the truth is that he only spent 3 years practicing law after law school. The rest of the time, he has been a politician, elected to the Illinois legislature or the United States Senate, and now President of the United States. Joe Biden, the Vice President of the United States, who before being Vice President was a senator from Delaware, if you asked him what his profession was, he would say lawyer. But the truth is, he only spent a single year working as a lawyer before he went into politics. And he spent the rest of his life, now many decades, elected to one political office or another. That's how politicians' careers generally work. This is their career. This is how they make a living for their families. Now, because this is how they make a living for their families, they have been described as single-minded seekers of re-election. And there's a reason to see that. If this is how you make money, of course you're going to want to keep your job. And the way you keep your job is getting re-elected. So as a consequence, members of Congress engage in what we can call a perpetual campaign. When they get elected, almost immediately after, they begin working on their next election. Somebody will win the election in November, and then by Thanksgiving time, they're already, I should say, win an election in early November. That's when national elections are held. And then by the week before Thanksgiving, they're back out raising money for the next election that will come years later. They are constantly working toward their elections because that's how they keep their job. That's how they keep their lifestyle. That's how they keep making money for their families. How likely are members of Congress then to win the elections that they're perpetually always working on? Well, seats in the United States Senate are more competitive than those in the House of Representatives. The reason is that these are considered to be more prestigious positions, so they get better challengers. And also, because they're representing entire states, they have more diverse constituency now. What that word constituency means is the people within a particular area represented by a particular politician. In the case of a senator, we're talking about everyone within their states. So they're going to have more kinds of people they're trying to represent, and so it's going to be more difficult for them to represent all of them, and there'll be more opportunity for a challenger to come in and criticize what they've done and get a wedge between them and some particular group. So senators have a little harder time getting reelected than members of the House of Representatives. In contrast, most members of the House of Representatives are in what we can describe as safe seats. Now, what we mean by a safe seat is that we know pretty sure beforehand who is going to win. The member of Congress in question is, say, a Republican, and they're representing a small part of a particular state that is overwhelmingly Republican. That's why they got elected in the first place. But that also means that they have a big advantage when they try to get reelected. Their district's overwhelmingly Republican. They're the Republican nominee, and so yeah, they're probably going to get reelected. Almost every seat in the United States House of Representatives falls in this sort of category, where short of some giant blunder, we know who's going to win well before the election. In fact, in the 2016 election, we are expecting that only about 40 out of the 435 seats in the United States Congress will actually be competitive. That means the other nearly 400 seats, well before the election, an accurate prediction can be made of who's going to win. All right, how much does it cost to win a congressional election? The minimum cost to get elected to the United States Congress is $2 million to get elected as a senator, or $500,000 to get elected to the House of Representatives. Now, what these numbers come from is if you look at those who actually won and the amount of money they spent, this is what you find at the low end. In other words, anybody that spent less than these amounts hardly ever wins. This is sort of a minimum threshold that a candidate needs to get over to be a viable potential candidate within a race to get elected to the United States Congress. But by no means is this what is typically spent. The average amount spent on these elections is $10 million to get elected to the United States Senate and $2 million to get elected to the United States House of Representatives. Now, even though members of Congress are wealthy compared to the American public, which I'll show you that in just a moment, they typically don't have this kind of money just sitting around that they can spend on themselves, although there are some really wealthy members of Congress who do have this kind of money that they can spend on their own elections. Most of them don't. That's why, to be a successful candidate for Congress, probably the number one attribute you need to have is you need to have a willingness, an ability to ask other people for money. They have to constantly be raising money, getting donations to help them get elected. That is the single most important characteristic that a potential member of Congress really needs to have, is that they have the capacity to get other people to make donations to their campaign so that they have sufficient money to spend on advertising and staff and travel and things like that to get themselves elected. All right, so what are the winners of these elections like? What sort of people manage to get through all this and get elected to Congress? Well, first of all, they are wealthy compared to the rest of America. The average net worth of a member of Congress is over $1 million. Now, as I said, this doesn't mean that most of them have hundreds of millions of dollars laying around where they can pay for their own elections. But it does mean that they have a particular social circle that they probably associate with. They know other people with money. And this allows them then to meet the right people to get money from them to then get themselves elected and reelected. Their average age is older than that of the average American. In the House of Representatives, the average age is 57. Here you see the oldest representative, John Conyers, a representative from Michigan. And the average age of the Senate is older, 61. And here you see the oldest member of the Senate currently, Dianne Feinstein, a senator from California. So they are older than the average American. And they continue to get reelected. So this age, this older age, it isn't just an aberration right now. This is typical that members of Congress are old. They also are overwhelmingly male. The current Congress has over 400 men in it and only a little over 100 women. And they are typically white. The current Congress has over 400 members who are of the Caucasian race and only a little over 100 people of other races. So what this means is that the typical member of Congress who has managed to win elections is probably going to be a rich old white guy. Now, this is changing somewhat. We're getting people of other races, women are getting elected, things like that. But still, this is the typical politician in America. This is historically what the typical politician has been. This is what people continue to think of as the typical politician. And that may help contribute to the fact that these are the kind of people that get elected. When someone thinks of a senator, this is what comes to mind, and this may make them more likely to actually vote for this kind of person. So now let's review what you learned in this lesson. What is the most common career of a member of Congress? Are they doctors, lawyers, politicians, or educators? Their typical career is that they are politicians. This is what they do for a living, getting elected. When does a member of Congress start campaigning for their next election? Is it immediately after being elected? 1 year before the election? 6 months before the election? Or just 6 weeks before their election? They start campaigning immediately after being elected. How many House elections are usually competitive? None, 90%, 50%, or 10%? Usually only about 10% of seats in the House are competitive. The rest we know well beforehand who's going to win or lose. What is the minimum cost to win a seat in the United States Senate? $50,000, $500,000, $2 million, or $10 million? The minimum cost is about $2 million. The average cost is $10 million. What is not typical of an election winner? Are they not typically white? Are they not typically women? Are they not typically wealthy? Are they not typically older? They are not typically women. The usual winner of a congressional election is a man. Okay, our next lesson will be from Unit 4. It'll be Lesson 12, and it'll be about incumbent advantages.